Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Wonderland, Part 2. I'm Dr. Lenny Time. I will be portraying the Dormouse, and we welcome you to Wonderland. Today we have Max and we have Alice, and I'll let them each give a brief introduction of themselves, and then we'll start talking again. Max?
Oh, no introduction necessary for me. I'm smiling in a full circle today. But yeah, the Cheshire cat tends to see things both ways and appear and disappear as unexpected.
Okay. Alice?
Alice is here to help people slay their inner Jabberwocky, to overcome the demon within them and expand on their heart.
For those of you who haven't been paying attention, Wonderland is a live action role play that is the first in a series that explores existence from the perspective of many novels of the 20th century and earlier. Alice, can you give the folks out there a brief history of what Lewis Carroll put together in his two books?
Well, first I wanted to share a little bit about Lewis. Okay, so let's go back about a century and a half to 1862. Let's think about what that time was like. So just after America was created, right, 100 years after that, and he was a clergyman, so he was working in the church. His father was an ordained deacon, so history from Christianity was carried through their family. And so being in a different time, first of all, he gets a lot of hate because a lot of people think that he was abducted his niece or assaulted his niece. His niece is who the story was written about, Alice. Alice Liddell is actually the name. And it's about, right, Alice dreaming, Alice imagining a world of her own because of the recognizing that the world was becoming more nonsensical. And so it is really prophetic, really prophetic. It told how the reality was expanding with all of the archetypes in the story that he had written, and the whole of the prophecy, right? It started as an real imagining a different world, and then takes you back in the sequel of Through the Looking Glass, to imagine the world from the other side of the mirror. Now, that other side of the mirror would be what some are calling heaven on earth, right? Because it is, it's seeing things more clearly. It is seeing from a completely different angle, an angle of the whole picture. Now, the trilogy, what we're living out right now, is merging heaven and earth, like in the Lord's Prayer, as earth or on earth as it is in heaven, right? So this whole idea takes you through the rabbit hole. From how I see it too, it takes you not only through, but then out the other side of the hole. So not back up through the hole from where she came, but but the other side of the whole, and understanding the shifting of the world, which would be the shifting of the age of time that we're moving in through. So yeah, that's how I see it.
So I'm just gonna piggyback on that explanation there at the very end. It brings to mind the shape of a Klein bottle. If anybody's fancied themselves into fourth dimensional shapes, the way you exit is the surface on the outside, but it's also the way you get in, and it's not the same way as you left. Very hard to describe, but visualizing a Klein bottle can help.
Why? Is it because you became a new person through that squeeze?
Or became aware of your potential by densifying your essence in order to prepare it to expand. Experienced your expanse in order to densify your essence. And
okay, which is so cool because according to the words in the Bible, right? It is once you have the Holy Spirit come inside of you, or Jesus's return, right? According to the way that the Bible describes it in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 19, how Jesus rises in our hearts. All of those teachings in the Bible are teaching you about how you become that new person and how you don't look back, because looking back is worthless.
I think that in science, there's a different model that is explained completely differently, but leads to the same conclusion, that how you get in is not how you get out, and it works for energy. And I think that if you can envision an hourglass, where the point in the middle of the hourglass is that pinch point is the 0 point, and the top and bottom of the hourglass are open to positive energy and negative energy, and that energy gets sucked in and brought into a vortex and swirled around. And when it comes out perpendicular to the pinch point and has changed the scale that the energy is functional on. And so everything rotates. The idea came from something called the primer field. And there was a gentleman who's still out there. I don't recall his name, but he did 3 videos on the primer field and then got discouraged because I guess he wasn't being watched enough and didn't make the last 4 that he had promised to make. But the physics is fascinating, and it explains a whole lot of both astronomy and subatomic physics in a way that I don't think the person who came up with the theory even understood where he was going initially. But he certainly...
Can you dig into the astronomy just a little bit?
Yeah, they took some of the early Hubble shots and overlaid the hourglass onto the image of what was coming out, and the clouds and the nebula clouds and the different galaxies all could be explained using this energy model. I'll find a link and I'll drop it. But there's so many things that are parallel but different, and we can save a lot of time by working alone, doing the same things as other people are doing, and coming together later, not sooner. And everybody wants to form these big groups of people right now. And to me, big groups are a very bad idea. We need little groups of very active people who can find themselves in their roles and continue on those roles as things disappear from the current standing. The world we live in is so fake that we're to go along with it and play the game anymore just doesn't make sense. That's why we've got
You'd have to be a
Wonderland.
Cheshire cat to run for office these days.
Okay, explain your run for office then, because the Cheshire Cat is indeed going to do that.
Yeah, well, first of all, so we don't lose track of it, time is hourglass. And so we can pour ourselves a cup of time anytime we need to take our time to understand the shapes of energy. The hourglass shape shows up in quasars and infinities galore in many different ways. So that
And you've got time here at all times.
anytime I'm here, time's here too. At least so far, that's been the case. But yeah, so when it comes to the Cheshire's run for office, it's the most insane and unexpected way of repurposing the infrastructure that's already at our hands or fingertips. And so even though it's walking into a dark castle for no reason, as long as I find myself sitting in that castle when the lights get turned on, then I really believe that the Cheshire Cat will be able to use the established infrastructure to help facilitate the Queen of Heaven's vision for the world at hand, because the service of the people includes making the best use of infrastructure. So if you have to pretend to be a fool to find yourself in a position of administering infrastructure during a time of transition, then I do not recommend it to my worst enemy, but a few of my best friends could handle it.
The Fool has his own card in the tarot deck.
Okay, I really like all of these metaphors, so I just want to merge them together with your comment about astronomy, because I'm really I've dug really deep in some of the astronomical phenomena, and so what you said about them layering the photos of the Hubble telescope from universe creation. Are you referring to the center point of the hourglass, which is the thinnest point? Are you referring to that as like a black hole?
I call it the 0 point, but I think it's infinite in dimension. But I don't believe that black holes are anything more than a creation of physics, and that a current physics understanding is going to be a liability, not a benefit, because they've mucked around with definitions and words too much. But yes, in a way, you can look at it as a black hole where once you go through it, you can't get back to the other side of it. But
Wow.
what I think it does is it rotates dimension space. And so we live in length, width, height, and some people think time is the fourth axis. It's not, but there is a fourth axis, and it's set to 0. And I've sort of started calling that fourth axis spirituality, because when it rotates through the 0 point, then spirituality and length and width might be the 3 keys, and then depth would be the one that people don't understand and don't include, so that instead of getting a tetrahedral, they're locked in a triangle.
Wow. My mind is exploding inside of it. I have like fireworks going off here because I'm connecting the first death that the Bible talks about. It talks about a first death and a second death, okay? And really, I see that first death that some people experience through like a near-death experience or a Lazarus phenomenon or something similar to that, or a complete ego dissolution and rebuilding of a healthy ego, looking at, the way that we have viewed the world and indoctrinated into the world, and then come out on the other side like a new person. I do see it as the same as the black hole reference that you mentioned, or the 0 point. I have one of my poems is called The Zero Code, which specifically refers to that complete rebirth that happens inside of our hearts. So Yeah, wow. There's so much.
I have a thought on this one that might be clarifying. If we're going to use the hourglass as visualization here, so in from my perspective, what we would call a black hole is what it would look like sitting at the top of the hourglass, staring down into the pinch point. And what we would call recently discovered or whatever a white hole or a quasar, the expression of light through the middle would be, I'm going to call it a white hole because it's Googleable, would be what that pinch point looks like from the bottom of the hourglass, staring up into it, the expression of energy. Whereas the top, staring down in the pinch point, looks like a black hole, the condensing of it. Then
Okay,
if
and
you
I really like
wanted,
that because last time I used that sausage making analogy, right? The
Mhm.
squeeze and then the expansion, the squeeze again, the expansion again, right? So I see that the ancient text is teaching us that um, a rebirth is not always in a physical death, and so how many times how many lives does a person have versus a cat, right? Does a cat, if a cat has 9 lives, does a person also have 9 lives too, or more, right? And so just expanding on the thoughts of everlasting life. Okay, so I'm going to go back to that verse that I mentioned earlier from the Bible in Revelation 2:11. It says, I'm paraphrasing here because I can't remember exactly what it says, but when you have experienced the first death, you're saved from the second death.
and I see the death concept too. I just want to finish one thought with the hourglass with the black and the white holes. Doc is saying shifting on your axis, again, very hard to imagine because it's like the Klein bottle. It doesn't quite make sense unless you feel it, because you couldn't draw it as a shape. But if you shifted that whole dimension, you get a cross now of hourglasses. And if you look at the pinch points from that direction, it's like a nebula and a supernova, depending on which way that you want to look up or down at it from. We've rotated now, but it's that white hole and the black hole is like the nebula and the supernova, the birth and the destruction, the light and the dark. So now we've switched entire direction field of energy. And that's just using astrological examples, because there's another way to twist, there's another plane to shift into, which Doc is calling spirituality, which is actually a really eloquent, surprised, haven't thought of that ahead of time, to think of that next shift on a spirit to shadow sort of plane of the same type of star creation, star destruction, matter creation, matter destruction. Matter creation would be white hole, matter destruction being black hole, nebula, star creation, supernova, star destruction, and then some sort of spiritual work and some sort of shadow work being a next plane.
So I really like that understanding too, and I'm going to relate it to another, part of mythology, even the god Uranus, right, is representative of the planet Uranus. And Uranus is the only planet in our solar system that spins on its side. So it's a 90-degree right? So this perpendicular action, right, is I have an old poem that I actually took part in responding to somebody else. So half of it is someone else's poem and half of it is mine. And it talks about how Uranus, father blue sky. And my part was flips on its side in order for Venus to fly. Now, Venus,
Yes.
again, is the only planet that spins clockwise. So Venus to fly is meaning that we are doing that reversal, right? The reversal that begins within us so that we create a new reality. Now I'm going to go one step further here and say that it reminds me of the alchemical transformation of the salt and the mercury making the sulfur, right? And that is the alchemical transformation. Now Doc is here, so this is great because you know chemistry. Maybe you can explain part of the chemistry in this, because this is an alchemical reaction that's talked about in a lot of the old text that happens within us in order for us to create our life work that we're here to create. We have to experience the bitterness and right.
According to modern science, atoms may not fuse. According to what I understand of chemistry, there's absolutely no reason to think that atoms don't fuse. And somewhere in the biological context of what we don't understand is a chemical mechanism for the fusion to create elements that the body absolutely requires but doesn't get through its diet. And so cold fusion was ridiculed in the late 1980s and early 1990s as being a bad experiment and a bunch of wackos, when the experimentalists were just following what the science told them to do and detected a radioactive isotope of water in the reaction chamber. After 30 years of arguing, I think that it's time to quit doing science one funeral at a time and really reinvestigate how alchemy works, because alchemy includes everything from the physics to the chemistry to the biology to the next, well, let's call it astronomy at the next level and put a level even above that. And the techniques that we use are self-limiting as a function of scale, so that right now, the only thing that we can be sure of on human scale, the physics work. But are those the same physics that allows a hummingbird to fly? Because by those physics, a hummingbird can't fly.
Same with the bee.
And when we ask questions like, are they really flying airplanes on jet fuel because they don't have enough jet fuel contained in the airplane in order to get the distance at any reasonable mileage for being put on an engine? And so we're at the point where nobody can take anything within this reality for real. I mean, obviously, they've been photoshopping a lot of pictures lately and letting the AI Photoshop pictures. And if you figure that the military had access to these tools shortly after World War II, you get the impression that everything we were given on television that we lived through is false history, and we're not even close to a proper physics of accounting. So Wonderland gives us a chance to wonder what would happen if we actually got the science right. And that begins with a concept called the ether. And it's funny because now I see at the cutting edge of physics, they've got new names for the ether, and they're proposing all these far out things that used to be known as the ether. And alchemy is based on etheric science. And the whole thing is holistic, but it's holistic, WHOLE, and encompasses the breadth of things and the depth of things and the width of things and the spirit of things. And so The mask that they've placed on us now is dissolving. It's important to allow individuals to explore their own spirit of individuality and their context of the human ethos or the big spirit without the burden of having to work for money to pay for a life that is working and sleeping in order to go to work. We all know that our work has nothing to do with what we get paid for, and that we'd be doing the work we're doing whether we're paid or not. And in fact, I'm not getting paid to do my work. And I wouldn't even accept money from any source unless it was enough to clearly advance the cause of what I'm doing, which doesn't require money except at the interface of Wonderland to what we're calling real life. But questioning whether real life is real life is easily a question we can bring up. And I challenge all the listeners to come up with their own definitions of things and figure out how it has to work to satisfy yourself. And then we'll expand from there down the road.
And this is where I really like what Alice has presented. 10% of your time. 10% of your time going to tasks that nobody wants to do. Now, trust me, there's people in the world like me who are very good at unclogging toilets and dirty jobs galore. And there's other dirty jobs that other people are good at. So 10% of your time going towards a job that you don't particularly want to do is all it would take to handle the dirty jobs of society. And alchemically speaking, because I don't want to lose track of this, Colonel, real quick, is when it comes to the combination of atoms, it's mind-blowing to me, because I'll post a link if it's helpful or anything, but a seed in and of itself is a seed of a plant in and of itself is indisputable scientific proof of this happening. There are contents in a sprout that are not in the water, nor the seed, nor the soil. It's very it's so Googleable. It's very well established that the sprout contains that which was not in the seed, water, or soil. There's something that happens there in the process of germination, which is outside of the flowery language of description, which is what Wonderland is made of. That is the alchemy of the combination of the true chemistry. And that's where I can start listening to chemistry. When we start to get down to the base rules of there's no reason to believe these strict rules that we've been taught. What happens is what happens, which sounds a little bit fanciful, but a seed itself proves it. Even one as small as a mustard seed, Alice.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you shared. I just wanted to remind people how much time. It's 17 hours per week. 17 hours. That's it per week. It's less than one day. If somebody wanted to get tied their time in one day, they would still have the rest of the time basically to sleep, right?
Yeah,
so,
I've worked a 17-hour shift before. I know people that have worked 24-hour shifts before. You can get 2 weeks done in 2 days, 3 weeks in 2 days.
I've done back-to-back 12-hour shifts.
Oh, such a nightmare. But if that's what you got to do so that you can take the whole rest of the week, then that's how you do it.
Didn't get the whole rest of the week, just had to step in for somebody who didn't show.
Well, yeah, in the old system, true. But in Alice's system, that would be plenty.
Well, it's one of our human needs is contribution. So everybody wants to contribute to the rest of the world. We are part of the world. We're part of nature, and everybody has a different way. So, and I'm sure that many people will want to contribute or already do contribute to more than 17 hours in building this new earth that we're here creating too.
Yeah, I know for certain, most of the building comes through the creative expression that I'm going to go ahead and call play at this moment. Like the work to be done is quite minimal, honestly. Like when it comes to infrastructure and upkeep, it's just that some of them are very dirty jobs. It's not fun to climb into the exhaust vent shaft and grease the bearings, but it's not. It takes the 10%, 17 hours a week would be plenty. We'd have an excess. Everything would be in perfect condition with just that amount of work on the dirty jobs, and everything else is just play and fun.
The other thing we need is a true apprentice system where we can start teaching.
Oh, Digital's got that
know.
solved, Doc. Sorry to interrupt you, but Digital's got that solved. You give any 16-year-old a pair of AR glasses that are also PPE to protect their eyes, and let me point, and not even just me, there's a lot of people better than me. Let them play the video game of pointing on which bolt to twist, and it just highlights underneath the glasses. The apprenticeship is going to be handled immediately. Like the knowledge, that aspect of it is not, I don't see that as an obstacle whatsoever.
You're going to have to bring up everybody to speed. So age has nothing to do with apprenticeship, but evaluating apprentices. That's something we'll need to talk about in great depth, because I think that what is given now for an evaluation system in true terms really sucks.
Agreed.
It's basically how much money you can collect and how many toys you can die with. And neither one is a very good concept.
Agreed, but Alice speaks to this as well. Like the embracing the automative effect. So I agree with you when it comes to evaluating the quality of an apprentice. We have a real problem on our hands. This is where it's going to be, or not problem, but a real an interesting puzzle to solve. But when it comes to the concept of transferring the knowledge to out in the field, it's already doable. I could do it just on the technology we're on right now with StreamYard. I have friends that I could call elders, I would call them in the maintenance world, and I could just take a video of what I'm working on, and they can just look at it live stream, and I talk to them, and they'll be like, "Oh, twist that one, hook up your gauge here," and tell me. If you integrate that into glasses, it happens immediately.
Come in and talk to us and explain what they actually do. Because
the best electricians I know tell you that the best electricians know that electricity is magic. I'm quite good at electricity. Three-phase gets a little bit, I don't have as much experience in three-phase, but when it comes to like low voltage and traditional line voltage, like even up to 480, pretty capable. I can fix whatever is broken. And the best teachers I've ever met say that electricity is magic. They don't really know. They just know what works and they stick with it. It doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, no, I have a theory that electricity and magnetism are not related at 90 degrees like everybody is taught. They're related at 109.4 degrees in a tetrahedral space as opposed to a right angle, because nature doesn't allow those right angles. There's vibration in between. But tetrahedral angles, 109.4, are to 4D what 90-degree angles are to 3D. And so when we bring in spirituality as a new axis, we're moving from 3D to 4D, but in essence, 4D is just an accommodation to 5D, and 5D is, well, you see it all over the new age stuff that's out there. It's a 3D to 5D shift. And 4D is just for those of us geeks who need a mechanism to get there.
Okay, I see it just a little bit differently because I received a drawing through my hand. Okay, so I see that there are 5 Okay, I drew 5 different ovals. The
I was
first one,
thinking 107. I was so thinking Pentagon.
well,
All right, go ahead.
the first one is actually 3D, right? Out of 5 ovals. So it goes 3 through 7. 5D is only in the middle, which maybe that's what some people consider 3D if they're saying that the first one is a one-dimensional. I don't know, but I got the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it would be like the previous age that was given to us, the third heaven. I'm replacing the word dimension with heaven here. So the third heaven, and then shifting to the 7th heaven, 5D. And in one of the poems that I received as well, in my poem called The Iris of the Eye, it says to mention the 5th dimension only puts a pause on the real cause, because I can see what sets us free. Okay, so
I love it.
yeah, you guys, I didn't make this up or think this with my brain. This was years ago that I have received these poems. I didn't know what I was talking about in the poems, but they're all very prophetic.
I think
So
that Cheshire Cat has a whisper for you on this one, Alice, for the 3 through 7. Hey, so it's kind of a Cheshire version of Chaldean counting. But there is that which is. There is that which recognizes itself that is. And then there is the one that is created from that self-recognition. And then there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Infinity. Done. All the countings, the numbers. This is why the Chaldeans are the keepers of the 7. Because the 7 holds the 8 that's infinity. And that was all 10, because there is that which has always been, that which recognizes that which has always been, and the 1 which is created from the recognition. That's the wave function collapsing on both sides. The counting starts at 3 if you're going to lift up your fingers and translate it into binary.
okay, I have to go back and watch it, because I don't know if you heard the thunder happening at the same time that you're presenting this to me, but I view that as pretty symbolic.
Yeah, the 3 through 7 is an important way of understanding how numbers work. It reminds me of what Doc taught me about the difference between a strong and a weak. The way of counting, like another example of a similar concept is like in Eastern cultures, when you're born, you're 1 already. So your first birthday, you turn 2. So the way that we look at the measurement of numbers is valuable. And so you pointed out the key essence of, you said you see the 3 through the 7, and then you said, I don't know how people start in 1 dimension. You didn't say, I don't know, but you pointed to the idea that dropping that 3 down into a 1 dimension doesn't really compute. And that's what I'm saying, is that 3 is that beginning of the counting, and after the 7 is the 8 that's the infinity that accounts for all 3 through 7. And that's Chaldean counting, because those 1 and 2 they're not negative numbers, but they're before that which is 3. Wherever 1 or 2 are gathered together, I am there also.
Okay, I get it. It makes sense to me. I hope the people that listen, it can make sense to them. I can share the photo. I'm not sure how to share it specifically on here, but I have shared it on my X page of the drawing that I received. And then I did a second drawing as well to just give an explanation to expand on it for people.
Yeah, and I apologize. I get a little bit aggressive with my tone of voice when I see like a really heavy-duty connection, but to paint Chaldean counting into Wonderland is nothing short of a miracle.
I think that incorporating all sorts of different narratives into one paradigm that makes sense for each of us and all of us, can take us into different systems of measurement. I use Fibonacci because I see it all over nature, but the doubling function is very important. And I should point out today is 6/12/24. 6 doubled is
I
12,
see.
doubled is 24.
I see. I see.
And it just so happens we're on the right we're on the right trajectory to create a living earth future, whereas most of the trajectory of what we had as earth growing up was run by that death culture thing. And I don't want to participate in their world, but I want to be able to have all the primary functions be a function of Wonderland. And so getting into the mechanism of how to come together and live together, that's going to take a lot of work, because communities that we were taught to believe in, like the anti-war movement and the hippie movement when I grew up, were totally discredited by the establishment, to the point where when I grew up, I wasn't really considering that. But as you know, the world works on us as much as we work on the world. And when you put your intention to something, it opens doors that most people can't even see. And so we're now in a world where several time narratives are happening simultaneously, but separately. And the challenges that we're working on are different from the challenges that have occupied the non Alice characters. And so by coming into Wonderland and rethinking the mechanism of how to put Humpty together again, and how Tweedledum and Tweedledee can ride the seesaw. And by the way, Ride the Seesaw was Jefferson Airplane, and Jefferson Airplane was also White Rabbit.
The Cheshire Cat's about to get us canceled so fast with all of these references. Om Shanti Shanti. Okay. Yes, definitely. You're not afraid to get canceled? I really feel like I should bite my tongue on this one.
I'm not afraid of getting canceled, because the 150 listeners that actually tune in will get it viral if it's canceled.
You just keep piling on. Okay. So if it gets canceled, then we might be on the right trajectory. And if you want to get viral, you might have to get for real about it, because the Mercury's been rectified. And I can see how Horton might be running their chronosphere both directions through the looking glass. And maybe that's what it takes to rebuild stains that only go one way, because
Yes.
blood without injury goes both directions. Blood with injury only goes one. Abel's blood still crying out from the ground.
There's different timelines.
There's so many different timelines.
Yeah, but this meeting between the three of us is going on a timeline that will get me canceled, but that's not the timeline I will be moving on. And I can straddle timelines from my ability of understanding what the differences are. And I believe that that's a skill that is teachable.
But that's what people do not see. Diglocka, that's what I'm saying. They do not see it. Diglocka, that's Red Mercury rectified. It's been a story since after World War II. It sounds scary if you do not see what I see. There's some evil enemy out there, I'm sure, or maybe there's not. Maybe the Cheshire Cat is just warning you that the danger was only what you thought you could do. Maybe it's been okay the whole time. Maybe you were just scared of the power. Maybe you didn't have the leadership of the Queen of Heaven to show you
And,
which way to not abuse your friends. And so
in
you painted a
other
scary picture
lines,
out in front of you,
in other
called it
lines,
reality.
we haven't
Come
even
back to
gotten there
Wonderland. Oh. All right. Cheshire,
What-
smiling.
Go ahead,
Because
Alice.
I'm getting the, I always look at the Cheshire Cat as the moon. Okay. I always am looking at the waning and the waxing of the moon, the smile of the Cheshire Cat, how the rest of the cat is hidden, and how the crescent moon is the part that appears when the Cheshire Cat wants it to. So I see the balance or the reflection of the sun to the moon, the glow of the moon in the
Is it
dark.
balanced in between the claw of the scorpion and the scales of Libra? Because those are some cat's eyes if we want to look at it. I mean, yes, there's a balance there. I'm smiling ear to ear.
So yes, well, you know that the sun and the moon. We just have to check the astronomical cycles to see when it hits. But it is all about that balance and the rising of justice, or the rising of Libra again, which I relate to that because it's my rising sign in astrology is Libra. So it is all about bringing the balance. It's my timing of who I came to be part of it. It just happened before I even knew my astrology. So
I find that astrology and astronomy get conflated with each other a lot more in people's minds than they really are. And that even though the astrology is based on the stars, what we're looking at as star patterns hasn't changed in my lifetime. And so there's no way that each individual star is moving on a separate trajectory at a different rate of travel. And some of these basic physics concepts are not applicable in the world. It's almost as though we're on Star Trek Next Generation holodeck, where the computer can make up any imagery it wants to put us in a world. And so, as we imagine Wonderland as it needs to be, we don't have to work on a path to get there from here. What we just do is build the here and enjoy ourselves immensely and learn what we don't know by reviewing what we do know in each different context and seeing if, when we agree on the context, what we understand is the same. Because right now in the world, people talk past each other because it's easier to confuse people with language than to use your words properly. And so
Which
it's
is
one
the
of the,
essence of the poetry of Wonderland, because it's
right.
confusing properly. We
There
all
is
do it in our
no,
own proper way.
yes. And so
it
Wonderland,
untangles the brain is what happens. Our brains are twisted in a certain way in the indoctrination, and then sometimes people think it's confusion, right, when it's untwisting, but it's sorting it back to nature. So it's a beautiful transformation that's happening within people, but they can't see the beauty in it, because it's like, to them, they're in the middle of a storm, so that all that they can see is a big storm cloud above them. They can't see outside of it yet. And I just wanted to bring in too that we're bringing up the topics of astrology and alchemy. which, according to the ancient teachings from the seed of life and the flower of life, these are ancient sciences that were used by our ancestors from many thousands of years ago. And they had their foundational systems were based upon this, where our foundational systems that have been used over the last we'll say 1,000 years or so. I'll agree with you, Doc, that I don't know if we were given exactly the right timeline, but
Let's call it 1,000-year wrong.
Oh, okay, yeah. So sounds great. Yeah,
Better than
1,000
a 1,000-year Reich.
So-
Or maybe that's what's coming next. We'll see how it goes.
So yes, these ancient sciences they were the foundational teachings, and in the modern education system, there's a foundational structure that the parameters were set without the ether, like what you're talking about. So this is the inclusion of the spiritual realm, or the ether again, rather than the negation.
Inclusion of what you do not see. Honestly, okay, so think about, so let's go back to astrology and astronomy for a second. So the ancients knew the stars well. I think we can all agree on that. There's a lot of examples of past peoples that have known the stars well across cultures, a whole bunch of ways. So call me a Cheshire cat, but from what I've learned from those timelines, the way that they studied the stars was on still ponds, because still ponds reflect the light when there's no light pollution. So you look down instead of up to look into the sky, so that you can receive the reflection, receive the deflection of light. Look down at the waters to see the sky, so that you can see that what's up is down. It's through the looking glass. That's how stars got mapped so well, is because they looked at the waters. And if you look at the constellations and map them over the waterways, you will find an interesting correlation. Because it was the waters that were telling the story. It was the waters in which the light was seen. You can stare up and look at the sky of infinity all day long, but if you want to get down to the heart of the integrity, you stare into the waters, the reflection of the light that you see. It brings you to the place that you're supposed to be. Navigation techniques, that's how they created the astrolabe. Like, because the they to me is not some evil cabal. The they to me is our ancestors that we've forgotten, that are trying to teach us what it means to look into the waters, to see the reflection of the stars, to remember that down is up and up is down. And that's how we get around this plane that we're on.
And top is bottom and bottom is top. So the world we live in is both charmed and strange.
That's physically accurate, down to charms and stranges.
It's extremely humorous that top, bottom, up, down, charmed, and strange are the 6 quarks that the physicists created to be subatomic particles that have no bearing at all on anything in chemistry theory, as a way of confusing people.
And it only took us 3 quirky Wonderland characters to untangle it.
Yeah. And the idea that what we think is consistent across many, many people, but the words that they've been taught are totally different from everyone else. And the teachings are generational, but they've split each generation into 2 halves, and those 2 halves are like polar opposites. When you're in grade school, middle school, high school, college, the people you hang out with all the time are your peers within 3 years of your graduation year. So in fifth grade, you might know some second graders peripherally. The third graders, you know who they are. They don't necessarily know who you are. The fourth graders are your buddies. The seventh graders just left to go to another school, but you'll catch up to them next year. The eighth graders have their nose to the grindstone figuring it out. The ninth graders are already figuring out what to do for high school. And 10th grade, high school, sophomore, you know the people who you went to middle school with, and you know the people who are in your high school who you're there with. And that's the extent of your peer world. And so figuring out how to make everybody in the conversation appear with everybody in the conversation, I think that would be more peership than what academia calls peer review, which
This is
has
the challenge that the Cheshire Cat has, because currently I'm not sitting within 3 years of anybody in this conversation. As far as I'm concerned, this is one of the challenges. Even if I put on my Mad Hatter's hat and pour a cup of tea for everybody, it's hard to translate Alice's poetry or the way that Doc sees time clearly, because there's nobody that sees time clearly. There's nobody that understands words clearly unless they've mastered Wonderland. So it's a really hard thing to translate to everyone at the same time, and that's what gets conflated as confusing, because it's not confusing. It's very much using all the timelines at the same time. Send it, Alice. I love your hand gesture prayers of excitedness. It's beautiful.
That, my hand going up, okay, because I didn't want
Go,
to interrupt.
Alice.
But so this is where, in order to bridge that gap, it's really why I like to bring in the Bible verses. Okay, so one verse here that explains this to a T, if people would go in and read if they want to, you know, especially the Christians who are so blocked from understanding that heaven is on earth. This verse is so great. It's one of Paul's writings. It's in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, specifically verses 2 through 4. Because what Max was just saying is the bridge of understanding heaven, and that people have experienced heaven, but okay, so what Paul says in these verses is, I don't know if I was in my body or out of my body, but I do know that I was caught up to paradise, and I heard things so astounding that no human is allowed to tell. So I take that in a way as Paul could talk. We know about his senses of his eyes, that he was blinded, right? But it never said he was mute. But when he says he can't talk here, what does that mean? No human is allowed to tell, not specifically talk, but tell, because there were no receiving ears to hear it. Or he couldn't find them anyway. And now we are gathering more people that are understanding through connecting, merging, collapsing the timelines right into one, with putting these ideas back together instead of decompartmentalizing the ideas and separating them, telling people that you're not allowed to use them, similar to how I was taught in the Christian religion about how never to study astrology. And so I never did study astrology. I've always kept that on the side, but I understand that it was one of the ancient sciences along with alchemy, which is very interesting with the Christian.
Alice, you're conflating the two terms, astrology and astronomy, right? Are you studying the stars or where they lay out relative to the body?
No, that's what I'm saying. That I like astrology so much. I study astrology so much, but in the Christian religion, you're taught not to study astrology, or you're taught not to study astrology. So I haven't.
Just making sure I understood. Thank you.
Okay, yes. So I haven't gone in and really dug and studied astrology. Yes, I've had a chart printed for myself. I know the signs, but I have also used it in a way of confirmation, right? Where I'm already this person, and my printout just confirms that I'm already being the person that I was being, instead of being told beforehand who I was supposed to become, right? So I have it, I'm aware of it, but I never dove into it and studied it and
That surprises me so much, because astrotheology, like the laying out, like all the symbols of coming from the Virgin of Virgo and the two fish of Pisces and the water bearer of Aquarius, like the Christ story is
okay, so
astrology.
that's where I tied the two together, is through astrotheology, because on my visit to Patmos in Greece in 2019, that's where I got the revelation, is when I was on the island of Patmos. I saw how John wrote the book of Revelation.
Wait, you've been there physically?
Physically in 2019, yeah.
Interesting.
You know,
Fascinating.
it was one of those places where it was like a magnet. I had to be there, and I don't know why I had to be there until after I was there, because it's just what I want to share with you right now, is that John's storybook, from being exiled to the island of Patmos, his storybook, he wrote the story of the stars, his understanding, his interpretation.
I completely agree. I think this is so missed. So missed. He's telling his story. He's stuck on
Yes.
the island of Patmos telling his story. Sorry for interrupting you on that one. Go ahead.
Okay, and so this is why people are now seeing the patterns between the story that was shared in the Bible, according to stories that were shared previously before the Bible. This is why all of the similarities or the patterns are shown. And so this is also the recognition of patterns, is the astrology. It's what astrology is based upon. Now I'm going to go back to where I was going before too, is alchemy, according to the Christian tradition, right? Most people don't know that Saint Vincent de Paul was an alchemist. That was his job. That's how he traveled, is he was a slave, taken in, and he was used for his alchemy knowledge. And so St. Vincent de Paul is well known and highly praised in most Christian traditions, but they don't even know his backstory. And so it's really neat bringing the Christian religion or the Christian teaching with alchemy and understanding how they merge together. And so, yes, the same is true with the astrology or astrotheology, right? And just showing those recurring patterns.
Excellent. And I got a shout out on this one because it lines up so much. I don't know who Upcycle is per se, but Alice, it seems that you see nothing. And the eyesight necessary to see the nothingness proves that you must have quite good eyesight. Very impressive. To see beyond the veil of tradition, you must see the nothingness. And so if you see nothing, that is some high quality eyesight. Upcycle, okay. You're spot on.
So that's really cool, because this comes back to what Doc was saying before about the black hole or the center of the hourglass, and how we were putting these pieces together. And my experience of why I see nothing is because I experienced the nothingness, the absolute nothingness, that first death. And without experiencing that death or that nothingness, I wouldn't know anything that I know today.
Which is interesting, because it's like you're almost like the opposite of the princess in the never-ending story. Like you found your name. So it's an interesting through the looking glass aspect of it. Like, would Alice rename herself once she found that she was Alice, especially if it was an Alice of Pie? because that's full circle. So what would you rename yourself? Alice of a slice of pie?
Well, okay, so this is actually my new name that I gave myself after this experience, and the more that I was finding out about myself. So I told you about my my trip to Greece and my visit to Patmos in 2019, and then in 2021 I found myself in Turkey. Okay, it was not a planned trip, but I was like, oh, Turkey, I know the Bible, so let's go take a tour of the 7 churches of the book of Revelation, right? And so drove all around Turkey. I was there for 3 weeks. And so let me see. I found myself on my birthday at Mary Magdalene's house. Okay. Okay. So, and it's so crazy.
This is
So,
why Wonderland is so wonderful right here. I love this
yeah,
stuff.
I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm like living in it. I'm just being, pulled and orchestrated.
It
Like,
was always here. The illusion was that it was not.
yes,
Like
you're absolutely
what Doc was referencing, the confusion, the distortion of what people consider reality. That's why Wonderland is so wonderful. It's because it reminds us of the wonder of this land. Like it was here. You are
and
living it.
it unfolds like a rose for you, right? So you're shown exactly what you're supposed to be shown at every moment. So part of what
Unfolds like a rose. Okay.
show,
Are we gonna keep with Mary Magdalene?
yes, yes. I'm going to stay with Mary Magdalene because she's also a rose, right? Or she's actually a lily. I'll say the lily of the valley.
Oh,
Right?
very, very particular of you. How cute.
Yeah, I know. You need to know the flower, the fleur de
All
lis.
the flowers smell the same to me.
Okay, so anyway, I found myself at Mary Magdalene's house on my birthday. Started studying about her. In 2021 is when I found out that the Mary Magdalene feast day was the same day on my birthday. And then I started, I dug more. Okay, this is when I found out 22 divided by 7 is pi. Okay, so it's all of these pieces, and I was like, well, and then not only that, what did I say earlier about the through the stained glass window of Santa Maria del Pi, the the basilica in Barcelona, which is in
The
the
alliteration writes itself.
it's in the movie of Through the Looking Glass, where she flies through time in her chronosphere, right? Through the looking glass. She breaks through it. Okay.
Well,
And
I'm hoping that we're flying with time currently because the Cheshire Cat doesn't like breaking time. He's such a capable host, but I'm hearing you so clearly.
okay, and you're laughing because it's funny. It's so funny.
It's
And
joyful. I'm laughing
yeah,
because it's joyful. Like that, it's that type of funny. It's not even the ironic, sad laugh that I have to do to get through society. It's like an actual joyful, like, yes, I see it.
okay, and so this is where so many people say that God is a comedian because you're shown these things and they are so hilarious. But why are they hilarious? Why is it so joyful? It's because you realize that you're living the life when you let go of the old world, you are living the life that you were designed to live, and it just happens.
So interesting. So old world from the Cheshire Cat's perspective reminds me of the Tartaria sort of millennial reign of Christ that we're reclaiming. But the way that you just used old world was referencing what I understand as the current world. But I like the idea of thinking of it in the past tense. But when I think of old world, I think of the world that was before the deception that we're currently experiencing. So it's just an interesting crossing of terms there because I heard you clearly, but now Doc's raising his hand. You're killing me, man. I love it.
I think that we're going to be living in the past as our future, and that when the time comes where the near death experience turns to an actual death experience, you've served your utility in the current paradigm, and now you're placed somewhere where you can influence a previous historical paradigm to change the history. And so there's no question that we can look at people in history who we've related to, both in fiction and in nonfiction sense, and we will become the character that we envision in one of our future lifetimes.
Okay. And what you just said was living in the past. Okay. In order to, I don't remember your exact words here, but in order to live our future, or
To build this future better.
we're doing that at this exact moment, because
Yes.
what was
Which is the trifecta of past, present, and future.
That's what I'm exactly saying. So I was just talking about my past and my trips and the things that I had experienced. That's my past. I'm living in the future currently, which is the present moment. I'm showing people that I'm on the other side. I'm already in heaven. Now I can explain this through the holy books as well. So when I speak, Max, you're speaking present moment because you view it as you're living in the old world as your present. I view it as that I'm in heaven. I see
that.
Shifted the reality. I see the past. Now, when you say world and I say world, I want to make sure that we're coming to the same terms. I see the world different from Earth. I see Earth as
I love that Doc is actually whirling the energy here while we're working on world. The words of worlds is really specific. This is good. I would like to come to the same conclusion. And Doc, that was hilarious with the world here because we're working on what's being world.
WHIR.
Yes, he was whirling it as we were talking about the world. This is Wonderland. It's gorgeous.
Just like he used whole with WH.
So good.
Yeah, and I understand that very well too. So I'm going to go back to the word world. Okay, the word world.
It's starting to sound funny with all the W's. I'm hearing you though.
I'm gonna use a K word now. Okay, so keep up with me.
Okay, I'll try to keep up. Only I could find the key. Alice, do you know where it might be buried? I can't find the rabbit. We only have a mouse here.
Yeah.
I'm keeping up.
I have the family key. Okay, and I need to release my poem. I have all the pictures done on it. But okay, so the word world, though, when you take it through the Bible and you go back to Greek, it's the word cosmos. Cosmos doesn't just mean world. Cosmos means age. This is a huge key right here for anybody that has or is going to church, because they
Could not agree more.
Destruction of the earth, not just the destruction of the world.
And the world's the age.
Exactly.
Yes, gorgeous.
When you unlock this particularly and understand that it's not the earth that's going to be destroyed, but rather just the old age, then you see things so much clearer. It's
Mary, quite contrary. Why don't you just spend your birthday in her house or something?
Oh, those silver bells. That's actually,
oh my goodness.
That's actually the lily of the valley. They're shaped like a bell. Okay, isn't this so amazing, all of these connections?
Oh my goodness. Anybody that's really into history, calling Mary a lily is pretty groundbreaking. It's actually probably more cancel worthy than any of the not seen Red Mercury jokes that I made. Because if you're going to call a rose a lily, we might have to unfold like a Brahmin. So yeah, that's good. That gets wild. I'm impressed.
Hey, I want to mention while we have the opportunity that each of us is on X, and that we're conducting spaces on X that allow a lot more people to participate in the discussion. So follow one of us, and that'll get you to any
I
space.
recommend Doc Time or
you go.
Alice because my account is very Cheshire.
Alice has a great account, and you can get her.
Yeah,
daily
Alice has a
feed.
fantastic account. I completely agree. And Doc is actually pretty good, even though he's too humble for his own good.
I don't do my main posting on X. I do my main posting on Minds, but I'm really thinking that it's time for us to create a different social website for Wonderland. And we'll just put the bug out there to the universe, and maybe someone will come in next week.
And I'm
have
going
a
to summon in Melodemon on this one. Melodemon's brilliant. Melody Man is also Melodemon. Melody Man. It's the same spelling. It's just how you pronounce it.
Maybe we can call
I love your sign language today, Alice. It's been fantastic. Your hand speaking has been magical.
Maybe we can call it W, because W is Cassiopeia. She's the queen of heaven and the stars.
How many W's do we have to put at the beginning of the website for you to be satisfied with this? Well, I thought 3 would be World Wide Web. How much more can we honor the W?
So it would be www.w.
You're making the Cheshire cat giggle at this point. Holy cow. But yes, I definitely agree that like the cross-platforming of the Wonderland LARP is unstoppable, and I'm grateful to be able to match with the Queen of Heaven and the Dormouse, or the White Rabbit, or the Cheshire Cat. I don't know. I'm pouring cups of tea for everybody, so it's all in my mind, I suppose. But I think it's beautiful, and it unlocks a lot of the detanglements that weave people into a veil of delusion. I enjoy it.
Just because of the cartoon history of the world, Wascally Wabbit should be included as part of the W's.
I don't know if I eat enough carrots for that, but I can definitely go hunting.
Gives everybody an excuse to use the phrase, what's up, Doc?
Okay, so somebody
the
said
Wascally Wabbit Doc loop. That is a Celtic knot of time proportions.
So
oh my goodness, Alice is literally stirring the pot now.
So I'm cooking. So don't get me
You're
confused.
cooking.
Don't get me confused with Shakespeare's witches that are weirdly weaving. Okay.
No, I've already confused you with them entirely.
They are weirding.
Weirding, W-Y.
Yes. Weirding words that if I had to give an introduction to Alice's poetry, I would call them weirding words.
Weirdly weaving. Okay.
Woven well indeed.
The octo, you have to call me the 800, right? The octo thing. Or maybe you can call me the wacto. It's a combination of wacko and octo.
Wascally Wabbit and the Wacky Wacto. Consider Jabberwocky slayed across all timelines. Holy cow, that's hilarious. And I mean that with a dot on my forehead, like, holy cow. I don't care what Moses says about it. I'm down to worship.
All right. Hey, we are approaching an hour and a half.
Oh my goodness.
So I want to say to everyone, thanks for listening. And I want to point out that the new way is to take everything we knew and weigh it again. And I think Wonderland is very well moving towards that. We are a member of the Virtually Not Alone network, so that anybody who tunes in can enjoy the space with us. And if you want to be a speaker on this at Wonderland Table, you must choose a role and have a fringe encounter with one of us so that at least one of us knows who you are. And
I don't recommend picking up the Cheshire Cat's hat. It's easier to pour cups of tea, but it's fun regardless.
well, I was just thinking about Madness, who is connected to all of us, and thinking that if you are connected to Madness in some way,
Oh my
sorry,
goodness, I have so much going on right now, I think.
it will be really cool to have Madness back on when he's done traveling.
And for those,
He's-
hold on. I got a hard stop right now. But yeah, for those that didn't recognize, the chick laid me an egg. That's Delilah. She used to be my roommate. She comes back in and lays an egg occasionally. That was part of the video stream. If you need to go back and look at it, there's so much going. Really hard stop here. I apologize. It's been fantastic.
Okay,
Not
well,
a problem. Take care.
Sorry, there's a lot going on right now. Give me just a split second here.
shifting worldwide to weirdly leaving.
Are we still here?
I think he might be gone. He's stilled.
I think he might be gone also, and we can help that. No, I think we've accomplished a lot of ground on what Wonderland is and what Wonderland is not. And for a second play of the LARP, it was very effective in building the three characters that we had here to each be a leadership example, although whether we're the alpha or the omega or a letter in the middle like pi, those things have meanings too. And I took the time today to refresh my brain on the Mayan Tzolk'in calendar, the 260-day calendar, and I believe that it is incumbent on us to change the calendar system so that we can still coordinate but not empower the beast by using their clocks and calendars. The clocks right now we'll have to work with, but time is not what we think it is. And I'm going to have, well, we're developing a room that's going to have clocks on people so that if there's 5 people in the room, everybody starts with 15 minutes. And if you've expired your 15 minutes, somebody else has to give you some of their time to allow you to keep going. And we played around with it. It doesn't work right, at least not in my brain. But I think I have some ideas that if we're playing with clocks and how to do things, we can envelop our clocks to become hourglasses. And then once they're hourglasses, they're in Wonderland. And so there's a lot to think about. Anything to say before I sign off and we take the chat back to private?
No, no, nothing else. Just thanks for being. I'm glad you're here and experiencing the shift and understanding the words that we can put into the experience. So,
okay. In that case, everybody have yourself a great rest of the day or evening or whatever it is. Thank you again, Alice. And we'll be back next Wednesday with another adventure through the looking glass into Wonderland.
thank you, Doc.
And now, as long as I can push buttons,